not done at all from the levina. Oh, so b'meila, he moves the levina to the side. And v'kaimetz, ideally, if there is a not equal, not harmonious application of the oil, if you notice that there's more oil here and less oil there, do the kemitza in the place where there's the most saturation of oil. It says misolta umishamna. We learn both things. Aleph, you don't make the kemitza from the levina. It's only misolta mishamna. And also, you want it to be the most gepregelte, the most far-oiled part of what you have in front of you. Now you have the kemitza. And the kemitza will invite to be put into a klei shodes. The noise in our komitz klei shodes, umekacha be klei shodes. The komitz shechilka b'shnei kelim einoi kodesh. So what do? You have to make sure that both parts are going to be put again into one keli. What's the final sanctification, which is done dafke to the komitz, has to be done dafke in one keli. But don't forget that we put the levina to the side. The levina is going to be offered. So Vait says that I'm invited. And now you gather all of the levina. You already have this final klei shodes. In it, you have the kemitza. The kemitza can be from the pieces. You have to appreciate how it's not that easy to make kemitza. We'll speak in a moment about the kemitza. But you're making kemitza many times into a wafer. You're making kemitza into a baked loaf of bread, and you're getting it perfect. Not too much, not too little. It's a big chachma to make a kemitza. But now you would put the levina on top of that kemitza. It's now that the kohen walked up on the altar. Always everything needed to be salted, aside of the three things that we mentioned in the dinam of the salting. The noisnoi al gabi hoishim, and he will put it on top of the fires from the klei shodes. Again, kemitza. That's what we learned in Pedikud Beis. That's only if it's a mincha from a non-male kohen. But if it's a mincha of a zichrei kahuna, eno kohenitz, elanois melech al kula umashlich hakoil al gabe ha'ishim. Halacha Yud Gimel says the Rambam keitzad kohen simen. If you're going to put your hand in a downward motion and you're going to have the back of your hand facing to the front of you, and you're going to put your hand into whatever is in front of you, and you're going to make a scooping motion to scoop something up, you want to do your best to have the product here, the mincha, in between your fingers and your palm. That is the proper kemitza. Before we get into the details of how you're using your thumb and your pinky, what we avoid doing, we don't want to have a scoop in where all of the product, all of the minchas in your finger area itself. That's not ideal. That's a much lesser amount, and that's not the correct amount of kemitza. So, which means pas yodei. You have to extend your fingers over the palm of your hand. So when you scoop, your fingers are trapping whatever is here. In our case, these menachos between your fingers and your palm, not in between the upper parts of your fingers and your lower parts of your fingers. That's too little of a scoop. If you only use your fingers, or min hatzedadim. Now, min hatzedadim, different ways of understanding what the Rambam is saying. Either using the sides of your fingers, or it means using, getting it from the sides of the container, not sticking your hands properly inside of it, then lo yaktir. However, again, all of this, ve'im hiktir, then hurtza. Not in kamatz yaktir. Even if you did kemitza, do it again. But if you already burnt it, then it hurts. Ve'im hoise b'kaimetz. Now, if you added to the kaimetz, not too little, because you only use the tips of your fingers, but it was too much. How would you make it too much? That you would not keep your fingers closed. So then, puzzle. Now let me add something that the Rambam is not writing, but it's taken for granted, obviously. That when you're making a scoop, getting whatever type of minchas in front of you in between your fingers and your palm, you're really only getting it in between three of your fingers, which is the index, the middle finger, and what we call here the ring finger. The kohen would actually use his thumb, and he's going to move it back and forth, making sure that any of the soilus, any of the mincha that's protruding outside the area of index and palm, and also using the pinky to remove any part of the mincha that's protruding beyond the ring finger and your palm. We don't want that to be included in the kaimitz. And that's the point that Rambam is trying to make over here. That even though in hiktir hurza, if it was a little kaimitz, more than a kaimitz is not good as possible. Final halacha yudalid ein kaimitz pachos mishnei kazesim. That's a fact. It won't be less than 2 kazesim in a kamitz. Even though people have different size hands, that will be the minimum amount. Umiktzas kaimitz ma'akev eskoli. Once you made the kamitza, all of it has to be offered. And if not, and if almost all of it was offered, not good. There's no atonement. HaKaimitz v'halavayna also both have to be burned. And if you did one without the other, it's not valid. Ma'akvan zedzeh. HaSoilis v'hashemen ma'akvan zedzeh. Gewaltig. And mixas hashemen ma'akev kulay, like we mentioned. And ein pachos miloig li'yisarein k'may shemayarnu. So there will be the exceptions where you're going to have more than one like for one isarin. Like, minchas nesachim, going back. You can have one isarin for the kevis, or for the kizba, or for the seira, as long as it's a little one. And you're going to have 3, but they'll never be less than the one like for each isarin. And thus we conclude the seder of the details of the menachos. We're going to start now learning Perek Yudalid. The Rambam is going to speak about korbanos, all korbanos that as a all right, we're going to learn the rule that we never had until now, that by Nedarim and Nedarim made it in their hearts to bring a korban, they're chayiv to bring it. We're going to learn that you're not allowed to delay, or in the positive, when you made a vow, bring it ASAP. There is some point where you already violated the positive commandment, and at a later point, you will also be violating the loy sa'acher l'shalmai. And finally, Perek Yudalid has a famous halacha that even though a korban has to be given willingly, if a person made a vow and they're not giving it, there is a level of coercion that must be done. But the coercion is for the person to say, I'm doing it beratzin. Perek Yudalid has 17 halachas. It's today's largest chapter, beginning with halacha Aleph, says the Rambam. Misnadev Adam v'noider, a person is able both to make a nedava. We'll see soon. Nedava means is when you say this is an oila. Neder means it's upon me to bring an oila, a shlamim, and v'chol min sheyirtza from the 9 menachos that are from a yachid, the final 5, all of them can come b'neder and nedava. And quickly reviewing, as we learned in Perek Yud Gimel, as the Rambam introduced in Perek Yud Beis, the minchas soilis, the minchas machavas, the minchas marcheshes, the ma'afei tanur chalois, and the ma'afei tanur rikikin. Another thing, since the Torah specifies the quantities of flour, oil, and wine that have to accompany many times the animal karbana is known as nesachim or minchas nesachim. If a person wants, they can make a vow that harei olai to bring a minchas nesachim, but then he has to specify from a keves, from a ram, or from the bakar, and then that person will be obligated, even though they're not bringing that with an animal, but they're going to bring that type of mincha with its quantity and the way it's prepared, the bakar or the pot, even though the Rambam mean adult, it even means an egel, but that you bring the amount of sudden and of flour and of flour, oil, and either as a pnei shehem kikar, it's in halacha base. Two people can make a neder to bring one animal, one carbon, whether it is an oil or shlamim. It can be brought in partnership. However, listen to this, my friends, a mincha can never come in partnership. Why? Divrei Kabbalah. That's the way we got from Moshe Rabbeinu. Halacha Yimel. What happens if someone pledged to bring a mincha and they separated the mincha and the donor passed away? So in most korbanos, not in all, in most korbanos, the children bring it on behalf of the parent. Now, if a guy left two children, we just said a mincha cannot come in partnership. They do bring it. Because even though the kids are bringing it, they're bringing their father's neder or nadava. The father was one. Halacha dalet. Now, with neder and nadava, let's clarify. Ezu neder ve'ezi nadava. Stam lohoyer, the Rambam say that it's not always the same. He began with nadava first, but let's go. If the obligation is on the person to bring an oil or to bring a shlamim, Harei olai mincha, or even if it's not even to bring the animal, but harei olai, the money of an animal, right? Harei olai, the value of this animal to be used as an oila. Harei olai, the money of this object to bring it as a carbon shlamim, that's called a neder. The obligation is on the person. But if he points out something specific and he says, this is a carbon. This is behemazu. Or even if he says the mei behemazu is an oila, we'll see. Or shlamim harei yisorein hazeh mincha, that's called a nadava. And the big fundamental difference, halacha hey, uma bein nadarim lenadava, is when you put the obligation on yourself, even if you already separated the carbon and later beyond your, it was stolen, it was lost, doesn't matter. You were not guilty, doesn't matter. You were not a pshia. You made a commitment that you will do something. You got to follow through. You have to go until, if you separated another animal and it was stolen, I'm sorry, it's your loss. But when you make a nadava, this is an oila. Well, if this was stolen, you don't have to replace it. A guy says the value of this ox is upon me to bring as an oila, upon me to bring as a carbon, and then the ox died, the house fell, as we learned before. Since you took it upon yourself, you have to pay. Omar, harei olai, but on the condition that I'm not going to be chayiv and achrayis. Even though you use the words olai, your clarification is effective. Ein chayiv achrayuso. Halacha zayin. Kvar biyarnu, the Rambam is going back to Peinik Tes of Bias HaMikdash. If you remember that, Chonyoi tragically felt dejected, rejected. He ran away to Alexandria, Shal Mitzrayim, and he built a temple in the same dimensions of the Beis HaMikdash. He did not build it Avodah Zarah. So the Rambam writes, we already explained that Shehois Abayis, Chutz LaMikdash. But in order to bring karbanis to God, even though one is not allowed to do that, it's not like a bias of Avodah Zarah. And therefore, now guys, there's an Isur Kodesh, to bring a carbon outside the Makam HaMikdash. So we're not minimizing that sin. But the point is that if a person makes a vow and he says, he said the word Mikdash. If he brought it in that location, he's not Yoitz. If he brought it in Beis Chonyoy, because he said Mikdash. But if he says, I'm designating this, or it's upon me to bring an oil, to bring it in Beis Chonyoy, so look at the irony. Even if he brings it in the Beis HaMikdash, you're Yoitz. If you bring it in that house, you're also Yoitz. Why? And that's why, even though his words, the bias hazeh, not being met, since it's for God, Adarabah, bring it in the Beis HaMikdash, and you'll be Yoitz. Now, don't forget that if you bring it the Beis Chonyoy, you'll also be Yoitz. That was your condition. We follow what we said. But you're going to be Chayiv Kodesh, God forbid. And another detail, Stam, even though if you're not allowed to do it, if you remember the whole sugya of Nadarim versus Shvuos, ain't Shvuah Chal to be Mevatel la mitzvah. right? Because ein shvua halal shvua, we are mushboim bo'emdim mahar Sinai. But a neder is chal, even, God forbid, to be mevatel a mitzvah, which is basically what this guy did. He made a neder to do something for which is a chiyuv kodesh. It's effective, and that's what he said. That I will shave. We're speaking about someone who, after he concludes the Nazida's vow, they have to shave all of their hair. If he said Babayis Azeh, if he shaved his head there, he's yoitz. Now it's more than that. Not only is he yoitz, he's not a nazir. Not to be a nazir, you have to bring the karbanos and the Beis Hamikdash. Yeah, but the moment you mention the house of Chanyoi, then we don't view your vow lechatchila as a real vow of nazirus. We view it as a person who took upon themselves to be mitztayer themselves, not to have wine until they shave their hair in Beis Chanyoi. So that's why it's effective. It's not a real din of a nazirus. And even though that a part of his vow is he's making up like there's no thing, I have to shave my hair by Beis Chanyoi. Okay, when he did that, then he's done with his vow. Halacha Chatos va'asham, unlike everything we began in this chapter, the oilon, the shlamim, and the 5 types of menachos, and then the other menachos, and a bird oilon shlamim, a chatos and a asham can only come for a sin. They can never be brought not as an eder nor as an adav. And therefore, or if a person asham, those words are nonsensical, which in a good way. So there's no consequence. Now, but if this guy was obligated to bring a chatos, he did that sin. He did the sin that demands an asham, and he says that then his words are binding. Halachates. However, if a person says there's another mitzvah, or there's a woman that gave birth, she is obligated on day 41, on day 81 to bring karbanis. The mitzvah at the end has to bring karbanis. We're not the yoledis, we're not the mitzvah, but we are saying I take upon myself to bring karbanis for them. So now, both in the Mitzvah and the Yoled, the sum of their karbanos will be dependent on their financial status, accordingly, animal or bird. So if the Mitzvah for whom I took that vow, if they are aniyim, then the one who made the vow will bring a carbon for them, a carbonani. If they were ashirim, even if the one who made the vow is an asher, right? Even if it was an ani, he says, I'm bringing it for them. If they are Ashirim, my vow was to bring what they have to bring. Reuven sinned. And Shimon is saying, I'm taking upon myself to bring the chatos for the Reuven, to bring the asham of Reuven. So first of all, you should know that if the sinner acquiesced, then the other person can buy it for them. Now, what happens when, again, the sinner is Reuven? Shimon made the vow. When Shimon made the vow, Reuven was fine. But then when it came to bringing it, Reuven says, it doesn't feel right. I sinned, I got to bring it. While they were bringing it, he changed his mind. The sinner says, no, I don't want you to bring it. I want to bring it myself. So like this, then because the fact that he wanted when he designated it, it's good enough. And let me add something. All of that has to do with the fact that when you brought the carbon, when you were makriv the carbon for chatos or asham, there was a vidui that needed to be said. So if the sinner doesn't want for that animal to be brought on his behalf, he's not going to say vidui. That's why it's not effective by the chatas and the asham. By other karbanos, it doesn't matter. He agreed in the beginning, good enough. Halacha Yud Aleph. So we learned the sugya. It's righteous people really avoid making vows. They really avoid making oaths. They avoid doing it. Now, Rishoyim used to be very quick in making vows. Like the Gemara says, two people were debating, even for something good. Two chaverim. tells B, come eat at my house. B says, I don't want. A says, nah, come on, come join supper. B says, if I'm going to eat in your house, then I'm making a vow like the wicked. What do they mean with these words? Wicked people, they make a neder, they make a shvua, they obligate themselves to bring korbanos, like a neder. That's what he meant. If a person just says, it's upon me to do that which the wicked vow, then that statement includes that he took upon himself to be a nazir, he took upon himself to bring a korban, and it's an oath. Oath meaning, if he was trying to imply that I will not eat, if he eats in his friend's house, then he broke an oath. But if he uses the words, I'm making a vow like the kshedim, kosher people don't obligate themselves on anything. So actually what he meant to say is, I don't want to go, but bli neder, like the kshedim. Harei like nidvas kshedim, if he uses the words, Harei olai, not kinidre, Harei olai kinidvas kshedim. So then, Harei zen nodar ben nazaru bekarben. So then, see, a neder is what the kshedim don't do. Nedava, kshedim bring. What's a nedava? We explain now. Because if I'm going to say harei olai to bring an oila, a kosher person would not make such a statement because they're chayiv and achrayis, and if they don't bring it sooner or later, they're going to be violating the we're going to learn soon. They're going to be delaying it. They're going to be violating loisa achar. If I make an nedava, that's how kosher people bring korbanos. They designate an animal. They don't say anything. They bring it all the way to the temple. When they're by the temple, they say, this animal is a oila. They make an nedava. And they only make the nedava when the animal is there. In other words, they almost make it impossible for their nedava not to be brought. So if a guy says, "Harei like nedava is kishedim," then harei is nadar benazir bekarben. All right. If you're saying if I'll eat by you, harei like nidva is kishedim. The kshedim make nedavos. So what he meant to say is that if I'll eat by you, I have to make a vow of nazirus, and I have to take a korban. One thing is never a shavua. Kshedim never make oaths. Chol kinoi korban ke korban. Another din. You can ask. The guy never says, "I'm taking upon myself to bring a korban." That's the way I understand Pshat in the Rambam. But since we know that when it comes to making a vow explicit to bring a korban, even if you don't say korban, if you say other words that are slang for korban, it's machayiv you to bring a korban. So harei olai kinidvois kishedim is also a kinoi of how you take upon yourself to bring a korban. I'm speaking all in the case that I gave. If I'll eat by you, then harei olai kinidvois kishedim. If I ended up eating, I'm not chayiv for violating an oath. I never made an oath, but then I'll have to become a nazir and I'll have to bring a korban. Halacha Yud Beis. Ein hanoider v'loyim is not the chayiv. Another rule. Piv v'libay shavin. Even though we're going to learn soon that you really don't even have to verbalize anything. But if you say, you have to have like Harei zu, a nedava, Harei zu oila, and he said zu shlamim, loy amar klum, chlal garnished, l'schavin linder bo oila. And he said a word korban. Now, korban doesn't exclude an oila. Korban is just a very generic word. That is effective. Lindoir bechedem. And he said hegdish, dvarav kanyamim. Because an oila is a korban. And chedem can go to the hegdish. As we learned the whole sugi of chedem. Sometimes chedem goes to the kayhana, but chedem can go to the berek habayis. Now, when do you have to have piv by shavin if there was a pit? But says that I'm a benadava, he's saying, you don't have to say anything. Even if you only had a hachlata, you made a kabbalah, I'm going to do something, even if you never articulated it, chayiv, ketzak. Gomer beliboy, he looked at an animal and he was so thankful to God, and he says, wow, God, this animal is an oil. Or, I'm going to bring an oil. Hadeiza chayiv lohavi. And that's coming from the pasuk called nediv liboy. Even if the generosity was only still in your heart, yiviyeha, then a divas halev is chayv lohavi. Chen kol chayotze b'zeh, minidrei kachim vin nidvoisam. Wow, the power of kavana, especially when it comes to hegdish. Halacha yud gimel. Echad nedarim unadavos im she'or advarim she'oram chai behem. From arachim, from damim, we learned all about this above. Maisres, matnas aniyim, all of them, mitzvahs, asay, min ha'torah. It's a positive commandment. Sheyavi hakol b'regel shepageh b'tchila. You should bring it at your first opportunity, which means whenever you made the vow, which regel is next? If someone were to make this vow now, the next regel is Pesach. We're learning this Beis Gimel Mar Cheshvan, Tavshin Pei Gimel. So next regel, if a person makes this vow a week before Pesach, saying Pesach, the positive is the first regel. Shenemar, as it says on Parshas Re'eu Basa Shama, and when you come there, then bring all of your vows. Ahavei Sam Shama. The Eish Tavi Lecha Lachayik, when you're going to celebrate, Tavi Kol Mashat Chai Boy, and the Titin Kol Chayv Sholecha Lisham. If the Yom Tov came, now first you already violated the positive commandment. Here you see why again Kshedim never make in the Darim. They make in the Davos, but why would they make in that? Ovru Olav Shalosh Regalim. If 3 Yom Tovim passed, and even though again this was a 5-way Machloikes Tanoim, that Rambam is paskening, it doesn't have to follow the order. Rambam is saying whenever you made the vow, if after you made a vow, the first regel came and went, you violated the Nasei. If 3 regalim came and went, now you violated Baal Ta'achar. By the way, you're not going to get Malchus for Baal Ta'achar because it's a lav she'ein by mice. Where you didn't bring the Arach and the Charavim Adamim after 3 Yomim Tovim, not only did you already after the first regel violate the Asay, however, ve'ein loikin alav zeh lefisha ein boy ma'aseh halacha yud dalid higdish behem alav mizbeach, and 2 regalim came and went. So the asay you violated. We're speaking now about the lav, but now v'nafal b'mum, now the animal got blemished, and you did what you're supposed to do. So you redeemed the animal. You used the money to get another animal. When are you chayiv bal ta'achar? So we view the new head, the new animal. You begin again to count. A full 3 regalim. Amazing. Another din, both a man and a woman equally violate the Baal Ta'achar, but the Yoresh, who's bringing his father's carbon, ain't oivel Baal Ta'achar, b'chlal, because he never made that vow. He should bring it for his father, but he's not violating. Halacha tezvav. Kol hakorbani she'avru aleim shalosh regalim. The animal itself did not become invalidated. I want you to know that don't forget there are other dinim when it comes to the age of an animal. But you could have, even for animals that have to be brought within the first year, you can have 3 regalim going by with the animal being 7 months old, right? If it was born right before Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot is within 7 months. Other animals can be brought, like we learned, a para is for 2nd and 3rd year. No, of course, if the animal has another invalidation, it cannot be brought. But just because the animal was not brought, the gavra violated. The chefza remains okay. Now, after the 3 Yom Tovim passed, it's not that okay, you violated once. No, every single day there's another violation, and therefore, based in mitzuvin. They have to coerce him. Now, coercing a person, halacha tazai, does it not say l'ritzoynoi? L'ritzoynoi means he has to bring it willfully. Yeah, it does. So the solution is, you coerce him to the point where part of the coercion is for him to say, I want. Simple solution. Even if he was mafresh, but he didn't bring it. Baal Ta'achar is when you don't bring it. Final one of the means that were done. Yes.
Sorry. We're coercing him, but he doesn't mean it. He has no kavanah. How is that a valid korban?
So the Rambam already explained this by Hilchas Gerushin, that also a get is only valid if a man gives it to his wife when the man wants. Whenever the halacha says that a man has to give it, says the Rambam, deep down, Kevan, we all want to do what God wants. The only thing is that the Yetzer Hara is the one that is coercing us. The Rambam writes that. So when you're beating the person, you're only beating the Yetzer Hara. You're not the Yetzer Hara is being beaten, allowing for the Yetzer Tov, for the godly soul to come out. Now, halacha Yudzai. Kol Chayel Yolis Shlamim. You take Basin will take a mashkin. That's a good way of, the good coercion. The guy likes his fancy car. They take his car away. You want your car back? Bring the car back. Again, however, when a person is chai b'chatos and an asham, there they don't have to take a lateral. Why? Because this guy knows that he will only get atonement if they bring it. That in itself will coerce them to bring it. See, a oilan ashlamim is a donation. Many people, they make a vow to a donation. They don't pay it. They feel, I know nothing was given to me. I'm not stealing from anyone. But if I have to bring it for atonement, there's already more security on behalf of Beis Din that this person will follow through. However, not always. Chatas nazir. A nazir is allowed to bring the yayin after he brings one of his karbanis and he cuts his hair and burns it under it. So he can bring the shlamim and I'll bring the chatos. So there, Shema Yachar Oisa, we are afraid that he's going to delay it. Lefikach Mamashkin and Oisa Leo, to guarantee that he won't come. This is all guaranteeing that he should not or she should not come to delay and violate the Balta Achar. Now, final Pedic for today's Pedic Tezvav. It's short, but it's a loaded chapter. Pedic Tezvav is going to give us one of the few great applications of a topic of when a person makes two statements, one right after the other. There's different ways of analyzing what that person had in mind. Either they made statement number one and they made a retraction, and statement number two is the retraction. Well, I'll give you the example in a moment. And you should know that even though that in most areas in the Torah, if you make a retraction, betoich kedei dibur, right away after you made the first statement, the retraction is valid. Kachim is one of, I think there's 4 or 6 exceptions where even toich kedei dibur you cannot change your mind. However, we don't say that you're making a retraction. As we'll see in a moment, the Rambam paskins based on the reality that one's mouth cannot make two statements at the same time. So there are times that you have to say, paragraph number 1, paragraph number 2, and you see from the context that the guy really meant to say the whole thing initially, but he needed to break out what he's saying in different statements. And we say that the second statement is simply clarifying what he had in mind from the outset, and therefore it's not a retraction. It will be a great example as we'll just begin in this Pedic. And you know what, let's just begin this because there's going to be a lot of nuanced dinim in this Pedic. Pedic Tezvav only has 8 halachas. And let me begin the following. We began in the beginning of the Sugi of Karbanos. If you remember, some animals can only be male, right? A oila can be a male, only male. Shlamim can be male and female. So you should know it's possible for someone to consecrate an animal for a shlamim, and the animal, if it's a female, could already be pregnant. Now, if I never spoke about the fetus, if I go over to my female animal and I say that you are my shlamim, then the fetus is a limb of the mother. Everything becomes a shlamim. But that's only if I made a statement stam. What happens if I want to separate the mother from the fetus? So the ideal way of doing it is first speaking about what would you like the fetus to be, and then speak about what you would like the mother to be. Because again, if you only speak about the mother, this animal is a shlamim, automatically the child will be a shlamim as well. If you want for the child, if it's male, to be an oila, so halacha aleph says, if you begin in the ideal way by saying, V'lada shelzu oila, the child of this pregnant animal, I'm consecrating as an oila. You're only speaking about the fetus. And the mother will be a shlamim, I'm a chayim. Here it's great. However, what happens if the first statement is the mother is a shlamim? And Chevra, if you would stop, the mother is a shlamim, what would be the din? The child would by default also be a shlamim. But then right away you said, but the child should be an oila. If we were to view the second statement of the child, the fetus, and oila, if we were to view that as a retraction, then that retraction would not be valid. You cannot make a retraction even toichel dibur. The Rambam paskins hoil ve'ein apeh yochel daber shnei devarim ke'echad. You lechatchila meant the mother should be a shlamim, the child should be an oila, and therefore here also it's not viewed as the retraction devarav kayamim. But the im achashram belibay for hoitze besvasav. But if you know, God knows what you know. The Eibishter knows. If I said on the mother that was pregnant, it's a shlamim. When I made that statement, I never thought about the fetus. Even though I didn't think about the fetus, halacha says the fetus is a limb of the mother. The mother is a shlamim. The fetus is a shlamim. Then I say, oh, the fetus should be a oilam. Garnish, that's not valid. But even if you made that statement immediately, within the time that it takes to see Shalom Alach Rebbe, you cannot make a retraction. Another thing. If a person makes a statement, the hand of this animal is an oila, or the leg of this animal is an oila. So first of all, we have a pasuk from where we learn, right? It says, Mikoil asher yitein mimenu Lashem. Mikoil learns that if I give some of it, it doesn't always automatically grab all of it. So my commitment was only for the hand. But you can't bring a hand up on the altar. I never committed more than the hand. So the solution is not consecrated money. But the part of the payment that you're getting, which is equivalent to the value of that limb, however that's evaluated, since you already pledged that to God, so that money is also not yours. What did you accomplish? Now that money will be added to other monies and another oila will be bought. That's chayiv an oila. Let's say he made a pledge. I'm going to bring an oila. How can that person fulfill his pledge when he's not buying a whole animal? He's not buying, he made a pledge to give a whole animal. He's buying an animal, he's not, the money, even if he gave money for that limb, that money, he's not buying that. It's not his. It's not his limb. It's the limb of someone else's pledge. You have the problem. So that's why that problem is brought up in the Yerushalmi. And that's what that solution for that is. You know when it's going to be valid? If a person made a pledge, I pledge to bring an oila in the amount of $1,000. Once I specified a number of money, if I spent $1,000 for an animal that went up as an oila, even if I didn't really buy all of it, because one limb was already designated as an oila, I did fulfill my pledge because the money that I designated was fully used in the purchase of an oila. Okay. Now, when do we say from this pasuk that we quoted, that just because you consecrated the limb, it catches the limb, schal on the limb, but it doesn't spread? That's only if it's a limb that the animal can live without. But if he says the heart of the animal or the head of the animal, cutting off the heart or the head, the animal cannot live. Now, now the pasuk that we quoted again that tells us that there is a chalois kedusha on only one limb from Mikoil Asher Yitrim Meno Lashem. That pasuk is speaking about a behema, not about a bird. So on the Gemara there's a doubt. Higdish Eiver Echad Min Ha'oiv Hadez a Safik in the Skadish Kuloi Oil in the Skadish. Halachigim. Ha'oimer behema zu chetzyo oila. Guys, halk up. If a person says this animal half is an oil, half is a shlamim, can't be. This animal can either only be one or the other. So the pshat here will be all of the animal is consecrated. None of it is going to be brought because it's called, you have two kedushos that are mixed together. So what should you do? You have to sell it. But since this statement is strong enough to imbue the animal with kedushas haguf, you have to redeem it. You can only redeem an animal that's not blemished only after it gets a blemish. So tira achi ipul b'mum, you cannot blemish it directly. We're going to have this concept used many times. You allow it to pasture until sooner or later it will get blemished. Now that it's blemished, now you get to sell it. You take whatever money you get, half of it goes for an oil and half of it goes for a shlamim. That's the way you fulfill your vow. Now it's going to get even more nuanced, more interesting. A guy's chayv chatas. And this genius says, half of this animal is a chatas, half is an oil. Or half chatas, the other half is oil or shlamim. He mentioned chatas first, and then he mentioned the other options. Or if he mentioned the other options first, and then he mentioned chatas. Now you got a problem. Ultimately, the animal will have to be let to die, as we will learn in the laws of chatois hamesos. Now let me explain like this. By other karbanos, generally, if the carbon cannot be brought, then you wait until it gets blemished and you sell it, and with the money you're going to buy a carbon in its place, or with its money you're going to buy a carbon oilas sibur leketz hamizbeach. Chatos is unique. Halacha l'Moshe Messinai that there are 5 chatois that if something happened, nothing can be done with that animal. You don't wait for the animal to get blemished. You cannot sell the animal. You cannot make use of the animal. You have to actually indirectly cause the animal to die. One of the 5 chatois hamesos is if there is a chatos, and as we mentioned in the previous chapter, by the donations of karbanos, you cannot donate a chatos. You can only designate a chatos if you did a sin for which you chayiv a chatos. So a guy ate chelav. He designated the behemoth. The animal, let's say, got lost. He wanted to get atonement. So he designated another animal, and he brought the other animal. Now we found the original animal. The problem here is that the owner already has atonement. That's called a chatos sheneschaperu ba be'oleho. If the owner already got atonement, that animal has to be let to die. Now let's bring it back to our case. What did we say in the beginning of Halacha Gimel? That if I designate an animal half and half, I can never offer that animal. Chatos, we already view this animal as a chatos and a schapru ba'aleh. How great is that? Because I will have to bring another animal. So I'm going to get my atonement. So this is going to be an animal that's imbued, half of it is imbued with kedushas chatos, and we said before it's kedushas haguf. V'harai, in the beginning of Halacha Gimel, you can't just sell it. You have to wait until it gets blemished. So even though you don't yet have an atonement, it's to be let to die. Halacha Daled, behemas hashutfim, that we said 2 partners could together consecrate an animal. Right, not a mincha, but yes, an animal, yes, a bird. Shehigdish echad mehem chetzyo shaloi. Now here, they both 2 people own the animal, so each one owns half. One guy says, "Mine is called," and again he consecrated the second half, keneva, which is great. And the Rambam writes many reasons why that works. He's troubled. He's going like nacharizah. Afapi. Because you couldn't have offered it in the outset because you only were magdish half. That's what we learned in Halacha Gimel. But since nevertheless, it was not that it was valid and then got pushed away. From the outset, it was pushed away. So first of all, something that's lechatchila dechuya is not so problematic. Which is why when you purchase, if you purchase the second half and your magnet shit, it could be brought. Now, furthermore, according to most of the common kedusha saguf, it means that even though it had kedusha, it is a dichui, it had holiness. But another detail, since animal was alive, so there's another rule: ein balachayim nidachim. Another nuance. The animal was actually fit to be brought. Had the other partner consecrated the other partner's half, everything would have been Shalom al Yisrael. Therefore, now that even though it came at a later time, you bought it and you were magdish it, tikrav, and to the point that it's so holy that this animal can also be used as a temura. Of course, not lachatchila. You're not allowed to make a temura, but if this animal was used for a temura, as we'll learn later, then the temura will be effective. Like this chapter has these nuances. Halacha, hey, hoimer demei behemazu oilom. Demei behemazu oilom. Now, what does it sound like? It sounds like you're not consecrating the animal. You're consecrating the value of the animal. Ki'ilu, I'm going to sell the animal, and the money I'll use for an oil. You know what? If this animal is sholem, if it's a tamim, it becomes an oil. Or if you say harezu le'oila, literally again it means not that this will be an oil. This is for an oil. It means I'm going to sell the animal, and its proceeds I'll use for an oil. That's what you said. Nevertheless, if this animal is ru'uya likad of oila, oila has to be male. If you remember, all karbanis have to be tamimim, not balimumin. We also learned you can bring a carbon from a tumtum, from an androgenous. It can't be a treifa, it cannot be kalayim, it cannot be yoitzer doifen. If it met all of the prerequisites, even though you only said the money, the value, niskacha kedushas haguf. Wow. However, it was blemished. Balmum and a keva for an oil. You can never bring an oil in a keva. Then timacher, then what your words will have come. Then you have to keep your word. It doesn't go beyond what you said. The yavi be the mea oil. Halachavav. Omer al behema temeya v'chayitza b'misurei akarben she'en kedusha chalaleyem. What did you say that what? That harei elu oila. Harei elu oila. Now, those words don't work. They can't be. But if you said harei elu le oila, that's the whole word. No problem. You never made a statement that it will become. You're designating it for an oila. That's what you meant. Sell it and bring the yavi b'demei oilos. Now what happens? The may para zu la oila kol shleishim yoim. You're making a statement. In a case where your statement will only imbue it with kedushas damim, but you want for your kedushas damim to be bound only for 30 days. And that was the whole sugya, guys, we learned together in the Gemara, whether if I say that this will have monetary kedusha for 30 days, does it automatically leave after 30 days? Or no? Or you have to redeem it. Without redemption, it doesn't leave. The Rambam paskins that it automatically leaves. So it's a crazy thing. It means if a guy said like this animal, its value, for this 30 days, he's saying it should be an oil. Which means if I'll sell it within 30 days, the money has to go for an oil. If I'm going to sell it after 30 days, then it should go to a shlamim. Now, we began this chapter based on the premise, if I imbue this animal with kedusha shlamim, I cannot make it into an oila. An oila cannot be made into a shlamim, but here it's only kedushas damim. And then Rambam paskins that if kedushas damim lechatchila was only lizman, the kedusha leaves. Wow. Oy she'amar demel shlamim kol shloshim yoyim ula'achar shloshim yoyim la'oila devarav kayamim. The kedusha, the shayna goes away by itself, and therefore do what you said. Maybe then commission adar. Maybe commission adar. Mamish gavaldi. They can final halacha ches. Hoysele behema meuberes. And v'amar in yolda zachar oila. Means you don't even know what the fetus is, and you're saying that if the fetus will be male, it should be an oila. If the fetus will be female, it should be zivchei shlamim. Such a statement is valid. And therefore, if Yolda Zachac, you can avoid Yolda Nekeva, Tikrav zivchei shlamim. What happens if you have twins, mazel tov? You got to bring both. So the man, if one was Zachac, one was a Nekeva, then it's easy. Hazachac yikrav oila, v'Nekeva zivchei shlamim. If twins, you didn't even know that, but you said the child was male child, there were two children, both male, one should be brought and the other one should be sold litzarchei olam. Litzarchei olam, for the sake of an olam. No, it's you're up the value of the second one has to go for an olam. But the animal itself, only one. And with that animal, after you sell it, the dam of chulin. Same thing if two twins, and they were both nekevos. One itself is brought as a shlamim. Now, what happens if the animal gave birth to a tumtim, to an androgenes? These are animal types, like we mentioned, that b'chlal can never be consecrated as a korban in kadeshim, and they don't have to be used for anything. It's not zachar, it's not nekeva. So nothing happened. So there's no kedusha. Nothing has to be redeemed. Finally, if the mother is a balasmum, even here you have the ability to consecrate just the fetus. That's a machlekes between Rabbi Yochanan, between Bar Pada, and the Rambam Paskins like Rabbi Yochanan. That was great.
Thank you.